Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Dynasty Fantasy Football Central podcast. I'm Michael Moore. He's Jonathan Scott. Say hello, Jonathan.
Hey, people.
Today we roll on and look at the new faces of the AFC South. Not exactly the strongest division, but hey, that just means a lot more to talk about, right? So I think we will continue our trend of going worst to first, and we do have some doozies in the worst department, but I think to take the cake, that would be your Houston Texans, Jonathan. And I don't know. I guess we just start at the top there.
I mean, sorry, I was this close to making a started at the bottom, now you're here joke, but that would have been just awful. So, so let's start with the quarterback situation in Houston. So we lump these together again. It's a common theme. If you have a new free agent quarterback who's a veteran and you draft a rookie, we've kind of just done them together. So we'll do it again with Ryan Fitzpatrick and Tom Savage. So we'll start with Fitzpatrick. In case none of you have heard in the last 7 years and the 1,300 references from Chris Berman, he's from Harvard.
I thought it was Yale. No, it was Harvard. It was Harvard. That was a joke.
Super. Any shot at Berman's worth it. But so again, he's a part of the Awesome Beard Club, but he is a journeyman quarterback who is turnover prone and is on his, I think, 5th team for a reason. He'll be able to do, I think, okay in this offense because I think he's coming into the best offense he's played in as far as weapons and the things around him, including coaching staff. I'm a big fan of Bill O'Brien. I think he's a great hire. But with that being said, you're still looking at someone who is going to turn the ball over a ton and someone who is going to have issues protecting the football. There will be streaks where he looks unstoppable, and ride those out as long as you can. My advice for anyone that has him as a low QB2 option, which again I think he is, he's just kind of filler. But if you have a 4 or 5 week stretch where this guy just goes nuts, flip him and see what you can get for him. This isn't someone you hate your wagon to in any form or fashion.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think he's probably got some value in redraft leagues. I think I'm probably a little more optimistic on him than you are. You know, I forgot what the research was that I was doing, but Fitzpatrick was literally a top 10 quarterback in fantasy a couple years ago while he was in Buffalo. Yeah. And sort of like you said, he's entering a good situation, offensively anyway. He's got Arian Foster, who, given, has not been healthy at all, but when he is, he's quite honestly one of the best running backs in the league and in fantasy. He's got Andre Johnson, presuming he doesn't get traded. He's got DeAndre Hopkins, and he's got a couple tight ends that I think could probably, save him a couple times a game. So, like I said, I'm probably a little more optimistic than you. I think he's probably low-end quarterback too. I don't think I have any illusions that he's anything higher.
Yeah.
But and we'll sort of touch on this in a second with Tom Savage. I don't necessarily see Savage being the long-term guy there. At least it's not a slam dunk. I think Fitzpatrick could probably hold on to that job for a little bit. Obviously it's all contingent on if they are winning some games and making the playoffs, which I quite honestly think is possible in that division. I think if any team could go from worst to first in a division, it would be that one, quite honestly. So, like I said, I'm not necessarily sold on Fitzpatrick as a long-term answer, but I think he could be a guy you could hold on to for 2 or 3 years, and I'm probably in the small minority on that one. But I think he probably has a little bit, I think he could have a little bit of the Alex Smith, hey, just don't turn it over thing going, and it can work out pretty well. Because, look, let's face it, in that offense, they're not necessarily going to be asking him to do a whole lot. It's like, hey, pass the ball off to Arian Foster. Throw it to Andre Johnson. Throw it to a tight end that you got. I mean, he doesn't have to do anything above average that any other quarterback wouldn't have to do.
Yeah. And smooth transition into Tom Savage. Like, I think this is a guy that fascinates me in the sense that I have no idea. Like, his ceiling, I think, is actually pretty damn high. But I think there's maybe a less than 5% chance he ever gets there. The only reason he intrigues me, again, is because of the coaching staff involved. If he is going to get to that 5% ceiling, Bill O'Brien's the guy that could possibly do it. Something to pay attention to with this kid is that he's only started, I think, like 18 college games in his career. He bounced around from college to college, from school to school, and never got the reps he needed to develop. And you're not getting those reps in the pros. Like, they're not going to give you games just to give you games. That's not going to happen. So I don't know how he develops. I don't know where that happens, to be honest. But if it does, I think this is a guy that the tools are all there. 6'4", 230, under 540 time, good three-cone, rocket arm, tough, doesn't mind getting hit, a little sporadic, does turn the ball over a little bit. But if these things can be coached out of him, and maybe they can, he was a guy that was a really high riser during the draft process. I know a lot of college football writers and stuff made fun of him because, of course, he's a guy that never produced but looks the part, so of course he's going to rise. They had him at the end of the first, beginning of the second. He didn't quite get to that level. But to think that NFL evaluators thought that highly of him, that he had that range to him, that he's intriguing to me anyway. I would draft him ahead of Derek Carr, for the record, if we're comparing apples to apples.
Really? Even though Carr will probably see playing time ahead of Savage?
Yeah, so we're going back to draft strategy. When it comes to the glamour position of quarterback, I'm going to go higher ceiling every time. Like, I want a guy who will be a starter for 10 years. Out of these two guys, I think Savage has a better chance of being a starter for 10 years or so. Because the hardest thing and most stressful thing to do, even if they aren't the best, even if they're not the most important commodity within fantasy, and you can argue that one way or another, people just will never give up quarterbacks. Like, it's just not going to happen in a dynasty league. So, if you have a chance to get that guy, for me, I would put Savage ahead of him. And again, for me, this all boils down to coaching staff. I think Bill O'Brien does a better job of developing quarterbacks than Dennis Allen ever will. So,
fair enough. Yeah, I think we can probably agree he's definitely one of those guys that is strictly a taxi squad guy, or if you just have an incredibly deep roster that allows for a lot of players on your bench, that's probably where he's going to be definitely this year. And like sort of I was talking about before, if they have one microcosm of success this year, then he's probably going to be waiting a little longer. So
yes.
All right, who's next?
Well, I'm going to apologize in advance because no one said how to say his name, but CJ
Fedorovich.
Thank you. Love it. God,
close enough. It's close enough.
Yeah.
So he's tight end out of Iowa. It's sort of like we talked about with Latimer. It's very hard to be a receiving threat in the Big Ten. So it's not exactly like he had a lot of numbers, but he was very good. He was sort of, quite honestly, he did everything pretty well. He was a pretty good blocker, pretty good catcher.
Yeah.
He got drafted by Houston, who have currently Ryan Griffin, who, by all accounts is supposed to step into the Owen Daniels role. They retained Garrett Graham, who will be strictly an inline blocking tight end. Mm-hmm. But then they draft Fedorovich, I believe, in the third or fourth round. So not exactly a throwaway pick here. And someone who, look, not a knock on Ryan Griffin, because I have him in more than one dynasty league, but it's not like Ryan Griffin necessarily has that job on lockdown. And with what Bill O'Brien does with offenses, and especially the use of tight ends, I think Fedorovich has, to sort of use your phraseology with Savage, a pretty high ceiling here. I think he could be sort of an Owen Daniels on steroids kind of guy in that offense and do quite well. Now, he's not a super freak athlete like your Jimmy Grahams or your Gronkowskis of the world, but at the same time, he's going to be manning the exact same position Gronkowski did in the Bill O'Brien offensive days in New England. So I think the situation is very good for him, and I think he probably is good enough to hold on to that.
Agreed. And I like the idea of a starting tight end in an offense where the other defenses in the division aren't exactly prime, we'll say. I'm trying to be kind here.
Where you literally can't name a linebacker in the division on the other teams.
Can't do it. Won't do it. Not going to try to do it. So I like the idea of there's a little potential here because there's no one that's grabbed the job, like you said. He's their guy. They drafted first year kind of coaching regime. You've seen the steps they'll take to make sure their guys succeed. And like you said, the division kind of sucks. So if you want to take a flyer, similar to a Travis Kelce of last year, where a guy who just looks like he's going to fit in from day one, this could be your guy. Someone to target within the third or fourth round, especially if you are in a league like ours where tight ends get 1.5 per reception versus just 1. I would have no problem taking a flyer on this kid.
Well, and to me, I mean, he's more than a flyer for me. He's, just quickly thinking about it, he's definitely not in the Ebron, Amaro, Safarian Jenkins class by any means.
Yeah.
But to me, he's at the top of that second tier. I mean, I cannot think of another tight end at the moment, rookie tight end, that I would rather have besides him, quite honestly. So, for me, I think depending on how camp works out, and if he shows, some flashes of being able to do the job, I think he could go, late second round, early third round, like you said.
Yep, agreed.
So, all right, I'll let you take this one. This is your boy.
You say that all the time, but this time you're actually right. So Jadeveon Clowney, number 1 overall pick in the draft. There is nothing like this guy might. I struggle to think about the things that him and Watt together will do to opposing offensive lines. Like one of those two is always getting single coverage. Holy hell, man! Like I don't know what you do as an offense to scheme against that, other than just pray. Every physical stat you can want in the kid he has. I'm not worried at all about the whole motor thing and all that bullshit from the draft because that's all just manufactured. The kid tries his ass off. He's a good kid from all appearances. He's going to a perfect situation where J.J. Watt is going to teach him exactly how to play across from him. And I also think people are going to laugh at Romeo Cornell being the coach here, the defensive coordinator. Romeo Cornell is he's the Norv Turner of defenses. Like he should never be a head coach.
And that's a good thing.
It's a great thing.
It's a good thing.
He should never be a head coach ever again, but that guy will get you a top 5 defense almost guaranteed. And the only thing, you've heard us say it over and over again, the only real knock on the guy is that, and it's going to not be decided until a year or two in his career, is he a linebacker or is he a defensive lineman? Because they're going to play a hybrid 3-4-4-3. He's going to spend half of his snaps with the hand on the ground, and the other half will be, standing up across from a tackle in a 3-4 outside linebacker position. I don't know how leagues value him or how they're going to label him, to be honest, because there's just no way to tell. If he's a defensive lineman, I would have no problem with someone saying, you know what, I have a need here. At the end of the first round, if you want to take him there, like that's how high I am on the guy. He's going to get between 15 and 20 sacks every year from day one.
Yeah, and I think, you're on point with the designation. I mean, it's really going to be coming down to, what is he? Because I think, like you said, the stats are going to be what they are. He's going to be good for 15 sacks a year. And, I look forward to the day that I can watch him and Watt line up, not only on the same field, but the same side of the field, and just see like what offenses plan to do to try to stop one of them. Because you're going to have one going on the inside and one going on the outside, and they're just going to meet in the middle, I think, at some point. So, and let's face it, the AFC South is not exactly a bastion of great offensive lines and quarterbacks. I mean, with the exception of Andrew Luck. So, I depending on how your league classifies him, if he's a defensive lineman, I'm with you. I would not have a problem taking him in the first round.
I mean,
if he's all right. Huh?
I was just going to say, part of this also is the situation, man. He couldn't be coming into a better situation for a number 1 overall pick. It's weird to say that, but he's coming into a fantastic situation where I would be utterly shocked if he fails on any level whatsoever.
I would say that's correct. And look, even if he is a linebacker, you're looking at least your linebacker 2 or 3 from day one. So if that's what he's classified in your dynasty leagues, even second round, I think, would be appropriate for him. I mean, he's definitely going to be, in the mix for top linebacker available, I think. I mean, even with Mosley and Shazier and all the tackles they're going to get. So, I think it's going to come down to position, but at the same time, if he's on your team, no matter what he's labeled as, I think you're going to be pretty happy with it. Agreed.
Totally agree. I'm glad. I can't believe I only took about 3 minutes on him. I thought I was going to have to hose myself down.
Well, it's a long preseason. I mean, there's a long way until the season, so we'll have plenty of time, believe me. And look, I guarantee you they will decide what he is before then, and we can circle back. So
I hope so.
Feel free to get the jersey in the meantime. That won't be changing anytime soon. So
I can't own anything from the city of Houston. Nothing.
Well, that's probably fair.
Sorry.
Anyway, all right. So moving on from one awesome team to the other in your Jacksonville Jaguars, which, no offense, I think I speak for all of us when I say that's probably the stunner of 2013 that they finished ahead of the Houston Texans. But I digress. And look, that's another team that had a lot of holes, and took the draft and free agency to fill some. So I think starting off, we'll probably look at your favorite, I know, Toby Gerhart at running back. Signed him away from Minnesota after he backed up Adrian Peterson for many years. Signed him essentially to be their three-down back. I mean, that is the way they want to go. And if you look at the coaching staff, headed by Gus Bradley, who was in Seattle before he was the head coach of Jacksonville, it's not unfair to say they view Toby Gerhart as their essentially white Marshawn Lynch and someone they want to pound the ball with. So, you know, and I know it's not a sexy name when you see it, but I think in these times of fantasy where the three-down back is going away and, you know, you just want someone that you know can get the ball and you can rely on, I think Gerhardt's going to have some value, and I think he's probably going to have some value for a couple of years, quite honestly. So, you know, I think he's squarely in the low-end running back 2 discussion, and could even move up to the mid running back 2 discussion, depending on, like I said, if they stick to what they're hoping to do, which is run the ball. And look, just like with running backs, like I was saying before, it's not the most consistent thing in the world, you know. And to have a guy that you know will get 25 carries a game, I think is very valuable. So I'm probably higher on him than you. Would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, the assumption you're making here is that, all right, cool, they're going to go into the season and he's going to get all these carries. That's awesome. How long do you think that actually lasts? I'm being serious. If you're in Toby Gerhart,
well, and you bring up a good point. You bring up a good point, which is, look, if you're a bad team and Jacksonville's still going to be bad, you're not going to be running the ball, you know, in the fourth quarter, pretty much. So, yes, so I agree with that aspect of it. But, you know, I think if they can get a better defense going and they hold on to the ball and have someone, I think, that they can pound it between the numbers, I think there's a chance they could be decent, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Fine. I look at this as more of a Chris Ivory situation from last year. Like, people were excited because this big bruiser who was getting out from underneath the shadow of an offense or a situation was going to this team. He was going to get all the carries, an awesome, great deal, up until the time he doesn't, and it wasn't. Like, there is potential there, and if Chris Ivory ended up grading out as a low-end running back 2 or a high-end running back 3 in your league, then that's awesome. And that's the exact kind of thing you should look for here, where it's a bad team on a bad offense, where the guy's only going to average 3.9 yards a carry. He's not explosive. But to your point, they may be bad enough and he may be neat enough. They just give him the ball a ton. And it's just they're going to force-feed him and force-feed you points in the process.
Yeah, I think, you know, anything higher than your second running back, low-end second running back, I think is fine. Anything higher than that, I think you're probably kidding yourself. But, you know, at the same time, like I mentioned on the last edition, I look more at the floor than the ceiling. So, and I think his floor is probably a lot higher than a lot of the guys ranked around him. So
that's fair.
All right, so moving on to another guy you're fond of, truthfully, Marquise Lee. We're going to look at him and fellow rookie Allen Robinson, the new receivers of the Jacksonville Jaguars. What do you got?
So I'm going to talk about Marquise Lee. You can hit on Robinson a little if you want to. I'll hit on a little bit. But so to let you guys know how excited I am about him, I'm having a buddy go to Vegas for me in August, and he's placing 3 bets for me. And one of them is I'm putting $100 on Marquise Lee to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. For as bad as the Jaguars are, for as bad as I think this offense could be, I think Marquise Lee is the steal of the draft. I think he's going to explode. I think he was injured last year. He was in a horrible situation in USC. I mean, their coach got fired off the bus after a game, for Christ's sake. There was no quarterback to throw him the ball. And if you go back to his 2012 film and look at what he produced and how he translates, the route running is immaculate. The after-the-catch ability is immaculate. The hands are more than good enough to play in the NFL. He will be an impact player from day one. He reminds me of a Victor Cruz type player, 6 foot, about 200 pounds. Cruz may be a little bit thicker in the bottom half, so the only worry I would have about Marquise Lee is just what held him back last year, which is injuries. The frame isn't as thick as a Victor Cruz. I'm grading that across the board. I get it. But man, I couldn't be more. I couldn't be more excited. And there's at least a guy in Cecil Shorts across from him who is good enough to draw coverage a little bit. I think you have to play them honest at least. So yeah, I don't know. I think the odds were around 15-1 last time I checked on him, and I could be dead wrong on that. But I'm putting $100 on him because I think he'll blow up.
Yeah, and this is another guy I think differ pretty starkly on. And yeah, I mean, like you were talking about, there's quite honestly, he was one of the bigger, I guess, drops of the draft from year to year. I mean, if he would have come out last year in 2013, he probably would have been, if not the first overall pick, definitely top 5. Now, again, that's attributed to his talent, but also how weak that draft was compared to this one.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he had something like 5 or 6 receivers drafted ahead of him this year, which if you said that last year would have been unfathomable. So,
yeah.
You know, you can discuss all day why that was. I mean, you can't necessarily argue his size changed or his skill changed. Like you said, the production dropped off a lot, and that was partially due to some crappy quarterback play. And, you know, quite honestly, it's not like anyone coming from a Lane Kiffin program, you know, was ready-made for the NFL. I mean, he's done a lot of damage in his lifetime. So,
yeah.
And I think, you know, at the same time, though, I think he's entering a good situation where, yeah, I mean, look, Cecil Shorts is not, that's not a sexy name either, but if you put him in the slot, he's pretty decent. He can make some things happen. So, you know, to me, Lee is not better than a lot of the receivers we've talked about already. Like, I wouldn't draft him ahead of Latimer, probably not. I wouldn't draft him ahead of, certainly not Matthews. I think him and Benjamin, for me, would probably be about level. That would be a toss-up for me.
One of us is going to be epically wrong.
Yeah, and we are. And I don't, sort of like I mentioned to you before, I don't recall a situation where a guy dropped so dramatically as far as, you know, draft boards go and ended up being a superstar, you know. I don't know. I'm just, look, I hope it happens. I mean, more power to you, but I don't see it. So,
yeah.
You know, I think he's probably going to get drafted in the second round of rookie drafts, no matter what your assessment of him is, because he's going to start right away. So you're going to get some value there, but depending on how highly you value him, he could go high second. You know, I mean, where would you draft him right now?
Oh man, if you have a need at receiver and all the receivers, the only receivers I would put at him are the ones we've talked about: Evans, Watkins.
Well, let's go down the list. Let's do who would you rather, okay, so to speak.
Oh, I got jumped on this game in high school, but all right, let's go.
I know, this is our version of it. So, yeah. Okay, Watkins and Evans, I think that's a no-brainer there, okay?
Yeah.
Brandon Cooks.
I'd rather have Cooks ahead of him.
Okay. Devontae Adams.
No, I'd rather have Lee.
Odell Beckham. Now that's a tough one because
yeah,
you like Beckham too.
Man,
for me, it's Beckham all day. I'm a little surprised this is like a jump ball for you.
I would probably take Beckham because I think he's a bigger guy. I think there's a less chance of injury.
Okay. Kelvin Benjamin.
Lee every time.
Cody Latimer.
Lee every time.
Wow.
Yeah. Sorry, dude.
Okay, that was about it. So, Jordan Matthews. Who would you rather?
Oh, I don't like Jordan Matthews. You know that. Like, I'm not that guy to be going after Jordan Matthews saying.
So I think we can agree. Lee's a second-round guy, and he's to me he's a boomer bust guy. I think, but at the same time, I think he's a guy you'll know pretty quickly if he's got it or not. I mean, he is who he is right now. So if he, you know, torches camp, then jump all over it. If he is a dud, he's going to be a dud. So
yeah. I think you'll know in the first 3 to 4 weeks of the regular season if he's not getting separation, if he's getting manhandled on press coverage and stuff like that. I think you have an issue. I have full faith that I don't think that's going to happen.
Right.
And that's why I'm looking at him. If he's there to me in the second round, I'll be ecstatic. But I mean, we'll see. I wouldn't mind if somebody traded up for him either. I think second round is solidly where you're looking at for him.
Yeah, I would say so. So Jacksonville also drafted another receiver in the second round, and Allen Robinson. Bit of a project out of Penn State. He had good production. It's not like he was a starter for, he just learned the game. But he's definitely not as polished as Lee is in any aspect of the game. But he's got size. He's got very good hands. And I think, the hope for Jacksonville is they view him as lining up on the outside across from Lee with Shorts on the inside. I think it's very apparent they want to go 3 wide eventually. Now, Robinson has been hurt to start off preseason, or not preseason, but OTAs and training camp. So we haven't quite seen what he can do yet. But, he's another one of those guys where some people have his ceiling even higher than Lee's. And therefore they're taking him ahead of Lee. I'm with you on this one. I don't view Robinson ahead of Lee. In fact, I don't know what all there is to like, I guess, about Robinson. I mean, look, if they did not draft Marquise Lee, I would see it. Okay, I would understand. Okay, they're building for the future. He's a bit of a project that they can coach. I get it. But you drafted Marquise Lee, but then you drafted Allen Robinson, and I don't quite understand it. And, sort of touching on the way they want to go offensively, if Gus Bradley is a true Seattle disciple, then, that means, look, their receivers aren't going to be worth a damn, quite honestly. I mean, you might have one as their go-to guy, but it's not like Seattle has 3 wide and, every guy is getting 1,000 yards a year. So I don't see it with Robinson. Am I missing something?
Well, I mean, to the broader point, I don't think he's a straight Seattle disciple. When it comes to building an offense, I mean, you're looking at someone who took the 3rd overall pick into a quarterback. Seattle hadn't done that, and that's not really their philosophy in years. I mean, I think there's a bit of, he's a guy on the outside. You're not drafting a guy who's 6'3", 215, and putting him on the inside and telling him, all right, you're our slot guy. No, I get the skepticism. He's a guy who's never averaged over 15 yards a catch. He's a guy who played in an offense that was mildly explosive, and it was a Bill O'Brien offense. So that he's got a good coaching pedigree. He's only 20 years old, man. Like this is sort of like an NBA draft pick. When someone comes out as a freshman, you're talking yourself into the possibility of what could be. And especially when you consider on the opposite side, Marquise Lee is going to be your guy that they expect to stretch the field within reason. Allen Robinson should be able to be the guy that moves the chains on the other side. He needs to gain about 15 pounds or so, I think. He ran pretty well at the combine. I don't think they really care about that. I think they want him to gain about 10 to 15 pounds, get to that 225, 230 range, and be that Brandon Marshall type big possession receiver across the middle who's tough to bring down. Because his hands are good enough to catch in traffic and over the middle. He's got a very good catching radius. Everything about him is projectability, though. Everything about him is this is what he's going to be. And it's not helping, like you said, that he's getting off to a slow start because of a hamstring issue with an OTAs in early camp. So,
I mean, I think for me, if I'm in the 3rd round and he's still there, I'm comfortable taking him. And I think he's definitely a guy that, again, if you've got a taxi squad in your league, he's a perfect candidate for that, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So, another guy on Jacksonville that I think is perfect for your taxi squad would be the 3rd overall pick in Blake Bortles, who even by your face I can tell that you're not ecstatic with it. And I understand the skepticism there too. And it's a touch of the Tom Savage thing where, look, you've got the size, you've got the intangibles, but you didn't really produce a whole lot, and you're not exactly polished yet. I mean, you do need some coaching. Now, to his credit and to Jacksonville's credit, hopefully, they're committed to not having him start or play a significant amount of time this year. I think they probably learned their lesson from the Blaine Gabbert experience, and look, at least at the very least, he's more built like a quarterback Bortles is than a Gabbert was. I mean, I think we can agree Gabbert was a bit of a stretch as far as being drafted in the top 10. Bortles has the size and he's got the skill. He just needs to be coached a little bit. So that's another guy that if you got a taxi squad, I mean, certainly, I hesitate to take him ahead of Manziel or Bridgewater, quite honestly. But if those guys are taken and I'm in maybe the late second or third round, I would take him, quite honestly, and I'd stick him on my taxi squad and hope that I didn't have to use him this year. So let's say, okay, for you, late second round, if he's there, are you taking him?
Nope.
Early third.
Nope. Let's clarify this real quick. Just hold on.
Late third.
Maybe. It depends who's there. You started this conversation off by comparing him to a fourth-round draft pick in this year's draft and then saying that the coaching staff is never going to start him and put him on your taxi squad.
Yeah.
Like, all reality and fantasy both tell you this guy kind of sucks. And it's amazing to me that the prior conversation is Allen Robinson, I don't see it, it's all projectable, and then Blake Bortles, yeah, I'm on board there, when it's completely all projectable.
Well, okay.
He's a victim of circumstance, man. Like, I don't think he's not talented, but there's a different level of pressure and a different level of expectation when you draft a quarterback. He's not sitting all year. He's not sitting all year at all. And you're asking me to say that this guy's going to survive from week 8 on? I don't see it at all.
Okay, well then let's clarify that. For me, projects as receivers are a lot less valuable than projects as quarterbacks because I think a team is a lot more likely to cut bait on a project receiver than a project quarterback. Mm-hmm. They drafted him in the second round, meaning Robinson, along with Lee. So what that tells me is, look, it's not like they are if they had to cut one today, it would be Robinson over Lee. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So they drafted Bortles with the 3rd overall pick in a very good draft. I mean, it's sort of, and you made this point a couple podcasts ago with Eric Ebron, which I thought was fantastic, which is, look, even though the circumstances don't look ideal for him, they still took him pretty high and in a good draft. And that's my feeling with Bortles is, look, even if he doesn't have it this year, which I don't know that anyone will say he does, for some reason they are committed to this guy. They put a lot into it. And they took him over a lot of good players, not just good quarterbacks, but just good players in general. I mean, they passed on a guy like Sammy Watkins. They passed on a guy like Khalil Mack, who could have helped him today for Bortles. So, for me, I think it's an ideal situation for a rookie quarterback. I mean, look, there's not any way I'm comparing him to the Lux and the RG3s of the world, where a couple years ago they were drafted and started right away and made the Pro Bowl right away. That's not what I'm saying at all. But for value for a guy who if you drafted him in the second round, I would not be opposed to that. So, and again, that's another one I think we're going to be vastly different on.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the highest he's ever going to be is a QB2 for me, and I'm not taking that guy. Like, it's shown in Dynasty Leagues especially. Like, you can get a QB2 as a redraft, essentially, almost every year. Like, and that's what I see this guy as. I'm not wasting an asset on him, knowing I can get the same version of him, only 7 years older, every year in the draft. So,
and that's fair. So we'll see about. Hey, I'll make you a bet right now. Okay, that he makes a Pro Bowl once in his career.
Yeah, I'll take that in a heartbeat.
Okay, and we bet over under
at half. I'll take the under.
And we bet a Blake Bortles jersey for it.
Now, how about this? If you win, you get a Blake Bortles jersey. If I win, you got to get me a Marquise Lee jersey.
Done.
That's how we'll do this.
All right. Wow. I think we've talked about Jacksonville and Houston a lot for not being very good teams. So let's move on. Right. So let's move on to God, this division is just bad. But look, I think there's a pretty good shot this next team in the Titans could be worse than Jacksonville and Houston next year. Am I wrong?
Not off base at all.
So just to review real quick, they did draft Bishop Sankey in the second round. He was the first running back taken. probably going to start right away, but it's not so much that he's, impressing in OTAs and training camp as Sean Green is your starter. So you don't have a choice at this point. So let's just start there with Sankey. Even now, teams don't view him as necessarily a three-down back. They view him as more of a change-of-pace back. And that's why a lot of teams didn't have him as highly rated on their board as Tennessee apparently did. But, they did what they did. They drafted Taylor Lewin in the first, which another sketchy pick.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Sankey real quick. He's a fast guy. I mean, he's, it's not like he's bad, but the question is he going to be a three-down guy for the next 3 to 4 years? And I don't know of anything I've read or seen that has indicated he is. I mean, what do you say?
I think he'll be a three-down back at some point in his career.
Really?
Yeah. So a lot of it has to do with his ability. He's one of the elite athletes in this draft that I watched in live, not even looking at tape. Like his ability to hit the hole, press the hole, and get to where he needs to go, and then jump cut in and out of holes to lanes is really, really impressive. His agility, and he's basically the anti-Trent Richardson, is what I'm trying to say here. His stop and start and ability to avoid tackles and avoid punishment, I think, is pretty elite. I understand the doubt because there is a size issue there, but man, he carried so much at his career at Wisconsin, especially towards the latter part. And the big downside here is going to be that coaching staff, that roster, that everything around him. I mean, you can talk me into some of the weapons. Like I think Justin Hunter might turn into something one day. Kendall Wright might be something one day. But Jake Locker is your starter with no safety net behind him. If this thing goes south, it's going south quickly. And at that point, I don't know how much you depend on a rookie running back to really, as they say, tote the rock and I hate that phrase, but to really carry the football every day, every Sunday, game in, game out. I mean, he's 5'10", 205, 210 maybe. I understand he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he did carry it 330 times last year and 290 before that in college. He can do it. He didn't miss games either doing that. So,
well,
if you're saying he's going to get hurt, it's based off how he looks, not what he's done in the past.
Sure, but not to act like a lawyer, but I could turn that around too and say, oh shit, he's got 600 carries in college before he starts playing in the NFL.
Oh yeah. And that's fair. I think he's only good for about a 3 to 5 year stretch if he is good. If you have him from his first contract, that's awesome. His second contract, get the hell out of Dodge. You don't want to be part of that.
I think we're squarely on the same page. Look, he's going to get opportunities this year. He is.
Yeah.
And he's going to be drafted first in rookie drafts, or the first running back anyway, because of that. And that's not to be taken lightly, meaning, starting that early. But yeah, I don't think he's, and I don't think last year in rookie drafts really proved to be a banner year. I think we can agree with your Eddie Lacy's and your Le'Veon Bells and your Gio Bernards of the world.
Yeah.
I don't see a guy this year on that level that will start at least initially. And again, it's some guys we've already talked about, like Carlos Hyde and Devontae Freeman, but there's no guy in this draft who's going to start right away other than Bishop Sankey, quite honestly. So, it's sort of good and bad. I mean, it's your gift and your curse with him. And, yeah, I think you're on point with the quarterback play. I think Jake Locker's about done. I don't care what Ken Wisenhunt is able to squeeze out of him. He's not going to be able to be anything more than a quarterback 2, and that's being generous. So you really have to think, and something I could see working in Sankey's favor, actually, is they're probably going to draft a quarterback next year. If any team I had to predict right now is going to be drafting quarterback in the first round next year, it's got to be the Titans. So, and everything else around them, at least at the skill position, is pretty good. I mean, they've got good receivers in place to take some of the pressure off. And, someone else that we will cover down the road, I'm sure, who quite honestly is one of my sleeper guys for this year, is Delanie Walker at tight end. I think Delanie Walker is going to be pretty decent this year. So I think the pieces are in place there for Sankey to be good, just not the most important piece at quarterback.
Oh no.
Yeah, okay, so let's play this game. Your draft. Let's just go down the list of draft position and see if he's your best available. Okay. So, first overall, no.
No.
Second overall,
No.
third overall,
Probably not.
fourth overall.
At that point, I would say yeah, probably.
Okay.
I think he can have a similar impact. I think he's a poor man's Gio Bernard. And Gio Bernard got more carries and more receptions and more opportunities as the year went on. I think you could see that same kind of situation here where as the year goes, they give him more to do, and he produces and produces at a high rate.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, it's just I think we're in agreement. He is a very good young short-term prospect, but if you're looking for your franchise running back, probably not.
I don't think it's that guy. No.
No. So, all right, who else do we got?
Well, transitioning, he kind of already killed his chances of ever doing anything with next year's first-round quarterback draft, the Titans. But Zach Mettenberger, weed smoking, back collapsing, Bama bangs and all.
Torn ACL, by the way.
Yeah, I know. He's on the list for me just because there's no other backup there. I mean, he might get a chance just out of necessity. And they may look at him. They may look at him for 2 or 3 games because the season's just gone to hell, like we said. And I don't think he'll do a whole lot. He does come from a Cam Cameron offense, who he's gotten professional coaching already, essentially. So he's got that going for him. I don't know. I mean, is he really worth talking about anything more than this?
I'm okay as a late round taxi candidate. Hypothetically, let's say you don't have any quarterback prospects on your team, and you're looking for one just to have a project on the off chance you hit the lottery and he does well. I'm okay with it, quite honestly, because everything you said I think is accurate. The whole Jake Locker thing could go south very, very quickly, and they could have to turn to someone to finish out the year. And look, just like we talked about, they've got the tools in place surrounding that position to be pretty good. So, I would say if you're at your last pick or second to last pick in your rookie drafts, I would be okay with it.
Okay, that's fair. Also, really quickly, just off the cuff, Dexter McCluster for this team, does he do anything for you? Is he anything at all?
I probably would say I'd probably be okay with having him on my team, actually. Okay. It goes back to the position, which doesn't have a lot of depth.
Yeah.
But, it's not like he's going to be second in line for carries, but he's going to be that passing down back. So could he develop into that, Danny Woodhead in San Diego type role? I think so. I think that's best case scenario. You still have Jake Locker at quarterback. I mean, the whole reason why guys like Danny Woodhead and whatever third down receivers playing in New England, the only reason those guys succeed is the quarterback's pretty good and makes it happen. So, I think top end he could be okay, but again, you're relying on Jake Locker for a lot of things there.
Okay, I was just curious. That was all.
Yeah. All right. So I think that wraps up the Titans, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, last but certainly not least, your Indianapolis Colts. Again, another team that it's not so much they didn't have holes at the skill positions. They're just pretty cash strapped and don't have a lot of room to maneuver there. So anyway, so I think the first guy we got on our list is Hakeem Nicks that they brought in via free agency. Yep. He will. I think what they're probably going for is to start him outside with Reggie Wayne, and then have T.Y. Hilton in the slot. I think that's probably where they're headed. Would you say that's correct?
Maybe. I see that. I think I watched way too much of Hakeem Nicks in the last 2 years because he has been my number one receiver ever since I traded away A.J. Green. Awesome move by me. You
got Gio Bernard. It's okay.
Yeah, I know. It was Hakeem Nicks and Gio Bernard for A.J. Green. Whatever. It's all right. But still, he has the ability, if healthy, to, I think, have a really good bounce back year. There were times last year, I know he played a lot of games. He was obviously hurt a little bit, but Eli Manning just missed him on so many throws last year that I can't imagine it's going to be the same kind of inaccuracy from Andrew Luck this year. I think he's already ahead of Reggie Wayne. I think he's better than Reggie Wayne coming off an ACL injury. I think T.Y. Hilton's a little one-dimensional. I think that dimension is really, really good. But I think Hakeem Nicks represents the one thing they have in this offense that can represent a bunch of stuff. He can get behind the defense still. He can go over the middle. He can break tackles when the ball's in his hands. He still has very good hands, and he's still relatively young. He's only 26. I mean, I understand the injuries have been an issue, but if he's healthy, I think he's coming into a perfect situation and is a buy-high guy for a year at least, anyway. And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. I can't quit this guy. So.
Yeah, I think there's very little to lose with him. Again, like I said before, I look at the ceiling or the floor more than the ceiling, and I think his floor is pretty high, quite honestly. I mean, he's entering a very good offense.
Yeah.
Luckily, I like to think that the coaches there finally realized, oh shit, we are not a running team. We have Andrew Luck. We should probably pass the ball. And, we'll hopefully realize that, and Hakeem Nicks can take advantage. And, I think you hit on a very good point. I'm a Reggie Wayne sympathizer, but, he's coming off an ACL. He's 36 as it is.
Yeah.
Hakeem Nicks is probably ahead of him at this point and will probably be the go-to target there for this season. So, now, as far as dynasty prospects go, and we sort of talked about this offline, the bad news is for Indianapolis that he's probably not going to be there next year no matter what. If he has a bad year, they're not going to re-sign him. If he has a good year, they're not going to be able to afford him. So, and that will determine where he goes, obviously, if he doesn't go back to Indianapolis. So I think now is the time to jump on the Knicks bandwagon, and I think you'll be rewarded this year, but I think it's definitely a case of, hey, sell high at the end of this season because who knows where he's going to go next year, quite honestly.
And the only other thing that can hold him back is the coaching staff. I mean, this coaching staff, the offensive philosophy there is shocking to anyone that knows anything about football. To just hand it over to Trent Richardson and Donald Brown over and over and over again when Andrew Luck's your quarterback is just...
Well, and it's things like that make people like you and me think we can run an NFL team.
At least at a high level. At least at a very high level. We can be like, hey, look. This Trent...
Oh, wait, I have Andrew Luck. Here's my game plan. Throw it.
Like, this Trent guy shouldn't really get the ball too often.
And you know what? Andrew Luck, you're pretty smart. I don't care who you throw it to. You make that decision. Just throw it.
Yeah. And again, the offense should be better because of Dwayne Allen coming back too. But to your point about Hakeem Nicks not being there next year, it sort of transitions into the other guy we're talking in this team with Dante Moncrief. If Hakeem Nicks does well, like, he's going to be gone next year no matter what, I think, anyway. And I think Dante Moncrief is sort of the guy they expect to fill that void. They're very similar physically. Moncrief's a little bit taller. I got about 10 more pounds on him, but 4.40, good in and out of breaks. Hands are questionable, sort of like Hakeem Nicks was out of college, but his hands were massive, but neither here nor there. And I think that Moncrief is going to have the chance to play in 4 wide sets. Maybe not play every week, but if this is someone you can stash on your bench, draft in the 5th to 6th round, and know that he's going to slide into that Hakeem Nicks role next year, you might find the upside going into year 2 for him if you have the patience.
Yeah, I'm probably a little higher on Moncrief than you. I would consider him in probably the 3rd or 4th round, because he's a young guy. I think he's 20, is what I recall. I think that's correct, but. Yeah. And he's entering a very good situation dynasty-wise. Like you said, he's got Hakeem Nicks ahead of him, who probably won't be there next year. You've got Reggie Wayne, who is nearing the end at some point. So eventually it's going to be him and T.Y. Hilton that are starting, I think. And I think that's probably their plan. And look, they know Andrew Luck is going to be, they're going to live and die by Andrew Luck. And they need to make sure he's got the tools around him, not just this year, but for many years to succeed. And I think Moncrief is a guy who's got all the tools there. And I think sort of like we talked about, again, offline, he needs to sort of do some work with his hands and make sure he can play to his size. But if he can do that, he's going to be very good. Like I said, third or fourth round, I don't have a problem taking him. I think he's going to be that good.
I agree. I think that the upside is there. If you're looking for upside, this is where you would look.
Yeah, it's definitely and look, even like you said, I think they're probably going to find ways to get him the ball this year, whether that's 4 wide sets or spelling someone like Hilton or a Wayne or what have you. So, I think again, it's all contingent on Andrew Luck and if they cut him loose. But I don't think they really have a choice at this point, and I think whatever receiver you have that's on the Colts is probably going to benefit from it.
Agreed, and there is a chance for him to play this year if Hakeem Nicks continues to get hurt and Reggie Wayne doesn't come back from his injury or gets hurt again. So there might be opportunity there early. For me, he's more of a stash guy, but the ceiling is incredibly high with him. It really is. I mean, he's already 6'2", 230, and still keeps in the 4.4 for his time. He's a huge guy, and so if he puts it together, I like that. I like the situation. Like you said, Andrew Luck may be the closest thing to Peyton Manning as far as just getting a bump by playing with him. So, again, assuming Pep Hamilton gets his head out of his ass and lets him actually throw the ball.
Or gets fired, either way.
That's likely. That's highly likely.
So, all right, I think that was it for the Colts, right? Not many skill position players. We could go off the agenda. I do recall one IDPer, probably of note, in DeQuell Jackson, who is everyone's favorite DeQuell, and he is going to take over that middle linebacker spot. Did very well in Cleveland last year. He honestly was a top 5 IDP linebacker for a stretch there. Play kind of suffered a little bit, but he goes to an Indianapolis team that, quite honestly, outside of Robert Mathis, needs some people that can make some plays. And even with that said, you got Mathis out for the first 4 games of the year. So there's going to be, an opening on that defense for anybody with any sort of talent to make a name for themselves.
Yeah. He's a top 5 linebacker to be drafted if you need an immediate fill and you have a hole there that you just need to fill and you need immediate production. He's a guy I'd look at as early as the 3rd or 4th round, especially if you get a point per tackle in your leagues like we do for IDP players. I mean, he had 140 tackles last year on a very good Cleveland defense. And now he's going to a bad defense, which I know that sounds inverted to what you want, but he's going to have every chance in the world to go tackle somebody. So I think he's someone that you can look at. If you have a giant hole and you need to fill it immediately, that's the kind of guy I would look at in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round if he's there and have no regrets about it because he's going to produce as long as he doesn't get hurt. No real injury history to speak of that would concern me anyway. And he's only 30. He's not that old for a middle linebacker. So, no, you kind of. I didn't want to tell you anything because you're in my league. I was going to look at him early. He's a guy I really like quite a bit. So.
Hey, go nuts.
I know. I will. I really will. I got to replace London Fletcher. That's how I'm going to do it. It's going to be with that guy.
Well, I'm very happy for you. I've got to replace Robert Mathis. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think that that concludes the AFC South. I don't want to say they're bad teams, but they're not good teams. So, but hey, you might.
Anyone that listened to this from start to finish, get a hold of us on Twitter or email. We will send you some sort of gift. This was.
Which actually is a very good segue. Check us out on DynastyFantasyFootballCentral.com. And yeah, if you want to tweet your distaste for our feelings on your favorite team, feel free at Dynasty_FFC. So, all right, I think that about covers it. Is that right?
Yeah, and if you also get a hold of us, you guys have any ideas on what you'd like to hear in the future, we've got 2 divisions left, but after that, we have space to fill until training camp and when news finally starts to come out. So if there's something you guys have questions about or something you want to hear about, let us know. We can probably fit it in the next 2 months.
Definitely. And until next time, we'll see you later.